What kind of skills? Thinking skills, cognitive skills. What kind of cognitive skills? Those crucial to being a flexible, adaptable human being, dealing well with frustration, solving problems. Those kind of cognitive skills. You see, I noticed something about 17 years ago. I noticed challenging kids aren't challenging every second of every waking hour. They're challenging sometimes, under some conditions, in some situations, under certain circumstances. I started noticing, what are those situations, conditions, circumstances, when there are demands being placed upon them for flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving. I challenge you to think of any challenging episode that you can remember that occurred outside the context of demands for flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving. And most folks have a great deal of difficulty coming up with anything. That's because that's when challenging behaviors occur. Stands to reason. If the only times challenging kids look challenging is when there are demands for flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, logic tells me it must be because these kids are lacking those skills. You see, this is a skills deficit orientation, not a motivation deficit orientation, and that is exactly right. You do something completely different when you think a kid is lacking skills than you do when you think a kid is lacking motivation. Those are two completely different looking interventions. What do you do when you think a kid is lacking motivation? You give him the incentive to do well because you thought he didn't have the incentive to do well in the first place. But what do you do when you think a kid is lacking skills? You teach skills. This explanation makes challenging behavior in kids out to be a developmental delay, a learning disability, which it is. No different than any other developmental delay. Kids who are having difficulty reading are having difficulty mastering the skills required for being proficient in reading. Kids who are exhibiting challenging behavior are having difficulty mastering the skills required for being proficient in handling life's social, emotional, and behavioral challenges. It's a developmental delay. Here's the cool part. When you treat these kids like they've got a developmental delay, like they're lacking crucial skills, when you apply the exact same compassion as you would with any other developmental delay, I find these kids get better. No, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast necessarily, but they get better. Continue thinking of them as attention-seeking, manipulative, coercive, limit testing, unmotivated. I find they don't get better. I find they often get worse. Just as a kid with a reading disability would if we decided that his difficulty was due to poor motivation, attention-seeking, limit testing, coercion. This is the second pass at defining the function of a challenging behavior. According to the second pass, what is the function of a challenging behavior? Simple. It communicates to us that this kid doesn't have the skills to do it better. Because if he could, he would. All challenging behavior communicates to us is that the kid doesn't have the skills to do it better. Challenging behavior is proof positive that the kid doesn't have the skills to do it better because, let's face it, doing well is preferable to not doing well. But of course, only if you have the skills to pull it off. Flowing from this explanation is this definition. This is the definition of maladaptive behavior in human beings, not just in challenging kids. This definition applies to everybody in this room. This is when we all look bad. Here's the soundbite on this definition. When do you look bad? When you can't look good. You'd prefer to look good. Once again, looking good is always preferable to looking bad, assuming you have the skills to pull it off. Maladaptive behavior occurs when the cognitive demands being placed upon an individual exceed that person's capacity to respond adaptively. That's when we look bad. That's when challenging kids look bad. Since that definition applies to all of us, then what really is the difference between a challenging kid and the rest of us? Not that much. Challenging kids are challenging more easily, more often, and in ways that are more extreme than the rest of us. And that basically is the difference between a challenging kid and those of us who think of ourselves as not so challenging. When the definition is met, there's a whole bunch of things that human beings do, and the truth is there is the easy end of that spectrum and the extreme end of that spectrum. But what's at the easy end of the spectrum? Crying, pouting, whining, sulking. I'm a sulker. What do sulkers do when the definition of challenging behavior is met? They sulk. What else would they do? Sulkers sulk. Criers cry, pouters pout, whiners whine. My son is easy. My 8-year-old son, he's a crier. I know that when my son is crying, the definition has been met. Something about life has just exceeded his capacity to respond adaptively. Why is he crying? Because he's a crier. Now let's move down the spectrum slightly. My daughter, not quite so easy as my son. She's a crier screamer. A little further down the spectrum is my wife. She's a screamer swearer. Now here's the interesting thing. Apparently adults can get away with the screaming and swearing bit, but if you're a kid and you're a screamer swearer, you have just accessed the school discipline program. I sure do hope they understand why you're a screamer swearer. Because if they don't understand why you're a screamer swearer, if they don't understand that, they may intervene in ways that make you worse and push you even further down the spectrum. What's further down the spectrum? Oh, biting, kicking, hitting, spitting, head-banging, destroying property, running out of the classroom. That's worse. Further still, behaviors that are injurious to oneself or others. Cutting, self-induced vomiting, that can be fatal. Drinking to excess, drugging to excess. Further still, ending one's own life. Ending someone else's life. Here's the amazing thing. They're all on the same spectrum. They all occur, most of the time, for the same reasons. Lagging skills in the domains of flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, and in response to certain problems. I call them unsolved problems. Unsolved problems precipitate challenging behavior. Solved problems don't. The goal of intervention is to move problems that are causing challenging behavior from the unsolved category to the solved category. And as you are busy moving problems from the unsolved category to the solved category, you are simultaneously teaching this kid many of the skills he's lacking that set the stage for his challenging behavior in the first place. Lagging skills are what confer vulnerability for challenging behavior. They are what set the stage for it. They are what make this kid more vulnerable to challenging behavior than other kids. What are they becoming challenging in response to? Unsolved problems that continue popping up and getting in their way. Of course, if your explanation guides your intervention, and you think it's lagging skills and unsolved problems that set the stage for challenging behavior in challenging kids, then the intervention that flows logically from that explanation is figure out what skills the kid is lacking and teach them. Figure out what unsolved problems are reliably and predictably precipitating the kid's challenging episodes and get busy solving them. Solving them how? Collaboratively,